Hi everyone, my name is Mao and this is my friend Billy
Hey,
and
everyone.
and we are the Silver Screen Syndicate and basically we just like to talk about geek stuff and that's what we're gonna do today. Um, so today we're gonna talk about Batman Year One because I recently read the comic book, maybe last year, and my friend Billy just recently read the comic book as well. And we are big nerds of superheroes, and I think Billy will agree with me that we like Marvel a lot, but at this time we wanted to explore a little bit of DC, and that's why we decided to talk about this comic book because it has a lot of good things. Obviously, it's a huge inspiration for Batman as it is nowadays for the recent movies. And so we just want to talk about it and geek out a little bit and then just have fun.
All right. You are the one who chose the the topic of what we're gonna do today. So, besides what you just said about um how important it is to today's perception of Batman, why why do you think? Well, why do you like it? Why do you think this is something uh, that you enjoyed and that maybe people would enjoy?
Yeah. Um, well, you know, um, I guess as an adult, because even though I don't look like an adult, I'm actually an adult. Maybe I still look like a teenager. But as an adult, you always look for good stories, whether it's through television or, the movies or whatever. And sometimes I feel like a lot of people do not realize that comic books has a lot to offer regarding good stories. And so I like Batman Year One because it offers a good story. And that's something that I'm always looking for. It doesn't matter the media or the way that it's delivered to me, as long as I can enjoy the characters, as long as I can enjoy the world and feel like makes sense, that's something that I enjoy. And Batman Year One is something that is solid, speaking about characters, about the world building, even Batman lore, and not just Batman, also James Gordon because he's a protagonist in that comic book as well. And so I like that it gives protagonists to a lot of different characters, and maybe we're used to, maybe modern television or modern movies have um, they have make us used to just focus on one character, and sometimes we see the villain as someone who has just this objective, and he's totally black, and the hero is totally white. But what's cool about Year One is that we have a lot of great characters, and they're not all necessarily bad. They're not all necessarily good. They just have their own agendas, and the world, Gotham, forged them as they are. And I think that's something cool about the comic book. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I agree. I agree with you in this sense. I love stories also, and I think everybody likes stories, and that's why they're drawn to movies. They're drawn to whoever likes to read stories, right? And a lot of those are plot driven. Good stories can be plot driven, or they can be character driven, as long as they are well told. It doesn't matter which one they are. In this case, um, they are. This one is character driven, right? We have, but what's cool about this one is that you have two protagonists. It's not just Batman's story; it is Gordon's story too. At least in the beginning, in the beginning of Batman's journey as a hero or superhero, if you will. Um, but here you have both Gordon and and Bruce Wayne or Batman or both at the same time, sharing their journey, their growth, and we get to see how their character develops through this first year of Batman's foray into superheroing, right? So that's one good point about this, because it's character driven, and it it helps us explore not just Bruce Wayne but also Gordon.
Yeah, I think it's I like the way that Mazzucchelli starts to or introduces the story, because we start with Gordon and with Batman, and they both share their vision of Gotham. And from that moment, we learn that this is going to be a story that is going to take the reader seriously, because they it sets the expectations of what's going to be about. It's going to be about topics that maybe weren't that common back in the day that the comic book was published. Is going to talk about corruption, is going to talk about violence, is going to talk about um, you know maybe infidelity. Well, infidelity, because the comic book also touches the topic about infidelity, so it sets the mood. And I think that's something very important in any story. You have to start to setting the mood first, so you can, as a reader or as a consumer, kind of like expect what you're going to be reading or what you're going to be consuming. And that's something cool that Mazzucchelli, or Frank Miller, I'm sorry, does with this story. He doesn't need to have a person narrating the story. He does introduce the story through the thoughts of Bruce and Gordon, and that's something that I think is really cool, because he is basically not taking the reader, from their hands. He's not babying us. He's confident enough that we're going to be able to come to our own conclusions when we start reading. And that's something that I like about stories as well. They're not, you can always come with your own conclusions. You can always uh, interpret the story in a way that you feel related. And maybe when a story is a little bit more simpler, there's no room for that kind of stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, actually, yeah, it does. In here, Frank Miller also, with the help of Mazzucchelli and how they do the dialogue, how they illustrate the dialogue, they give us this sense, this ambience of an old pulp fiction story of a detective, right? In this case, two detectives, and they allude to, by how they write, by how Miller writes the dialogue, and he goes back to the film noir time of when Batman was started, right? Batman started in 1938, and he started as a detective, and now in actually detective comics, right? But now, uh, through the changes that it went through, it became more of a cartoon, or a cartoonish character. And what I like about this one is that, well, one of the things I like about this one is that Miller, in the writing, and Mazzucchelli in the art, they take back Batman's identity as a detective, and as someone who lives and works in the darkness, right? The art is a lot, well, darker than what it had been before. And also, as you said, the themes: corruption, infidelity, and violence, that hadn't been portrayed in Batman for a while, until Miller came along. But I'm curious, and I know your background is in art, so I was gonna ask you, how do you think um, Mazzucchelli frames this, or gives us that characterization at the beginning? Because I know you mentioned Mazzucchelli instead of Miller, right? You confused them. That's
I
fine,
completely.
but I think your point still stands, even if we were talking about Mazzucchelli. Um, but as someone who doesn't know a lot of art, and you who do, how does Mazzucchelli work this characterization of the place of Gotham City to set up the ambience?
Yeah. Um, so Mazzucchelli, what I've noticed when I read the comic book is that Mazzucchelli uses a limited color or a limited palette of colors. At the beginning, everything is very gray. You know, the tones are grayish and even monochromatic in some sense. And that allows us to understand that this is not a happy story, you know. And a lot of artists, you know, a lot of movies use this same resource, you know. It's always that, it's always been used, but I've noticed that they do it more in animation more than anything. I mean, they do it in other movies as well if the direction of the movie knows what they're doing, but in this case they use the colors, you know, the gray colors to convey that this is going to be dark. The shadows are very graphic. Usually, for example, if you're trying to draw a human, you know, as a regular artist, you would try to um, difuminate the shadows, you know, you would try to render them in a way that they look 3D. But in this case, Mazzucchelli, he uses very graphic shadows, and a lot of the people in the vignettes are just completely black or just they have a bunch of shadows. And so there's a big contrast, you know. I mean, from this, um, when the expect when the reader see those vignettes, you automatically know that this is going to be something more mature, something more noir, something more serious, something that is not going to be, I don't know, like the Batman from the 60s or the 70s. I remember there's actually a comic book of Batman where he has different suits. I think a pink one, a blue one, a
Oh,
red one, an orange one.
oh gosh.
You don't see none of that here. You see a lot of shadows, and that's one of the things that Mazzucchelli is trying to, um, you know, draw in all the vignettes. Even in the ones with a lot of light, he's trying to be very bold with his shadows, and I think that's how he sets the environment, how he sets the scenery overall.
I think the visual as well as the story is pretty important here for for us. I think I mean, for us as modern readers or modern spectators, right? Because um, Batman Year One is kind of like the birth of the Batman that we know today. The Batman with pathos, the Batman with who operates in the darkness, who won't kill, but who operates in the darkness, and it's pretty brutal sometimes, or even merciless at times, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here you see this aesthetic is not completely the same, but this darkness, this these defined characters that you can see them in in Batman the Animated Series, right? Batman the Animated Series came out 5 years after Batman Year One.
After year one.
Mm-hmm. But you also see a limited color palette, high contrast, in the light and shadow, and a lot of times even even Batman, just you can just see his eyes come out of the shadows, right, and then become this huge uh figure in the show. If I remember the opening correctly, the
Mhm.
opening to the animated series. Um, but to me, that's the beginning of Batman as we know it today. I don't know if um, Tim Burton's Batman has anything to draw from him. It's the Batman is still a bit cartoonish in his movies, right?
Yeah,
In both the first one and the second one, and even grotesque. The character design and the city, it's grotesque,
yeah,
but but it's but here year one is more real or wants to be more grounded in reality. um and you can see that not in Tim Burton's Batmans, but in later on in Batman Begins, and even in the Batman last year's the Batman, right? There's more uh reality, if you will. That I remember the big change with the Batmobile. Back when Batman Begins came out, everybody was either scandalized or pumped because the Batmobile was actually kind of adequate, right? It wasn't a fancy car for a show. It was a utility car.
yeah. It was a tank in Batman Begins, and and that's something that I'm pretty sure that Christopher Nolan and Matt Reeves, they took inspiration on that. They took inspiration in something that is actually useful, not just fancy. Because with um with I forgot Tim Burton's Batman. His Batmobile is very fancy, and when you see it, you don't really think that it's very realistic. Maybe, I mean, in that era, I'm pretty sure that that looked impressive. But if you look at the movie again, maybe you would think that that looks silly, you know. And even Batman's helmet, he cannot turn his head, he cannot turn, or his neck. He needs to turn his whole body to look, uh, look to the right or look to the left. And with Christopher Nolan, we even Batman in the second movie, he says it would be nice if I can turn my neck, because in the first one, Batman Begins, he cannot turn his neck. He needs to turn his whole body, and those are just the little details that I really enjoy. That makes it more believable, even though if you think about it with with a cool mind, logically, maybe someone like Batman wouldn't be able to exist in our actual world, but in that movie makes it more believable. And it's the same thing with um, um, Robert Pattinson. When he was cast as Batman, and I remember when I saw the first pictures of Batman of Chris. I'm sorry, Robert Pattinson as Batman. I remember that a lot of people didn't like the helmet because it looked amateur. And then I remember that there was a tweet or something saying that he was supposed to look like that because it was he was an amateur Batman, he wasn't a fulfilled vigilante yet. It was just his beginning. So it was meant to look like that because we're trying to be realistic. We're trying to make it look like he could actually exist in our world.
Yeah, now that you mention Pattinson's character uh, or in the Batman, um, that I believe if I'm not mistaken, that this is year two for Batman in that universe, right? That time, but still, you can see the influence of year one in there because, for example, I'm thinking about Robert Pattinson's or the movie's use of year one in it. Batman or Bruce Wayne travels in a motorcycle, right? He doesn't have his gadgets. He has he doesn't have well, he has his gadgets, but he doesn't have his vehicles yet. Um, he's more inconspicuous in the motorcycle trailing Selena, and in Batman Year One, he also uses his bike to move around. I'm especially thinking of towards the end when he is going to save Gordon from Falcone's son, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Um,
Nephew.
uh-huh. He drives around in the motorcycle, and just when I rewatched the Batman, that was like, okay, this is another thing that he borrows from Year One. This characterization of Bruce Wayne Batman, more, I don't know, less developed, but at the same time more practical in his approach.
Yeah, I actually didn't think about that until you said it, but it's true. Um, One of the things that I actually notice on the Batman, the Matt Reeves movie, is that Bruce Wayne and Batman, they don't have much of a difference as a person. It's almost the same person, even with or without the suit. And, well, obviously, it's a different universe. Matt Reeves wanted to do it like that. He wanted to make sure that we knew who Batman was. And I guess that's why Robert Pattinson or Bruce Wayne is the same with than without the suit. But for example, in Year One, um, when Gordon goes to interrogate Bruce, Bruce is trying to act as a different person. He's trying to act as a playboy. He he asks Alfred to bring club soda, and he pretends that he's drinking um, champagne or whatever. And he has a supermodel next to him, and he says, "I would tell you her name, but she doesn't even speak English." Or he says she doesn't speak a language that I know. And Barbara uh, Gordon, she says, "What a pig!" or "What? How convenient, right?" And then she thinks that he's a pig, and then Gordon says, "Yeah, he is trying to, or he's acting as someone who doesn't want their secrets to be known." And maybe in the movie, in Matt Reeves' movie, Bruce Wayne doesn't care much about if they figure out their identity or no, because he's always acting as the same person, with or without the suit.
Yeah, there's not a difference. This persona of the Playboy millionaire is still not there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bruce Wayne hasn't found the practical or the convenience of building that persona to conceal his identity. I don't know what's going to happen in the next movies, but in Year One, you see that built. Another one of the differences in the characterization, and not just with the Batman, but in general with Gordon, that I really enjoyed about Year One was James Gordon, um, because first he's a badass. He's not just the police lieutenant
Yeah,
who knows uh, just police stuff, right? He is an army or he's in his former military, and he knows how to fight.
yeah,
And if you saw any other media with Gordon, you wouldn't think he knows how to fight, right? Uh, and he's so good that uh, when the time comes and need comes, he beats up uh, his partner, who is a lot bigger than he is, and who's also military trained, but he's not as good as Gordon. I thought that was pretty cool, uh, seeing Gordon in a different light and not just someone who totally depends on Batman to fight crime. In the Batman, he's a little bit different. He's at least he hasn't shown any of those abilities, but he is still smart in the Batman, right?
Yeah, yeah. He is still smart, yeah, but we don't see, like you said, those abilities. I think we see it more in Christopher Nolan's trilogy. He's a little bit more of an action man, you know. He gets his hands dirty a little bit more. Um, and well, I was also thinking about Tim Burton's movie. Um, I think Gordon. I don't even think that he is very relevant in that movie. You know, he's just like a regular cop that eats donuts. I mean, pretty stereotypical in my opinion. And I mean, I guess makes sense, you know, back in what that movie came in the 80s, the 90s.
89, the first one in the 89, yes.
Yeah, I guess back in the 80s, beginnings of the 90s, the stereotypical um, cop was still very, you know, embedded in our minds. So I guess that's why Tim Burton just portrayed him as just as a stereotypical cop. You know, he doesn't have a lot of relevance, not that I remember, anyways. But and like you said, I like that in year one he's a badass. He knows what he's doing and he thinks logically. He doesn't just act. He has a method that he has learned over time. But that doesn't make him completely good because he also cheats on his wife. And I actually want to talk about that topic, about him cheating, because maybe, you know, when we think about Gordon, if you play the games or if you've seen the movies, you think him as a hero, and he is a hero, but we don't see that other side in maybe the comics or the movies or the games. And it's cool that Frank Miller lets us see Gordon as a human, you know, not just as a cop that is a hero. He lets us see that he has temptations, and um, and I think it's important, you know, for us to explore that face of Gordon because maybe you can be more empathetic to him, or maybe you can hate him, but I think it's just important on his character development as well.
Yeah, that's another thing here. Um, Characters are no longer one-dimensional. At least Frank Miller's characters are not one-dimensional anymore. There's more complexity to them. In the case of Gordon, it's yeah, he's someone who is fighting uh, to erase corruption from Gotham and the Gotham police specifically. But he's not perfect. He's not a complete Boy Scout, right? He has his faults, and we see them. The same thing with Bruce and Batman. And further on, we could talk about Selina Kyle and see how she is not just uh, she's not a socialite as she's been portrayed in other media, but she's a prostitute, and that's kind of brave for the time to change, to go to these sordid environments and to go to these um, dangerous places, or at least questionable places for characters where they are not sanitized. We see them at their worst, and we see them in positions that are not the nicest or the best.
Yeah. Um, I think, for example, Matt Reeves, he in his movie he wants to explore a little bit more of Selena's um, dirty side, I guess, if you could say it like that. But I guess we imply that she does something like that in the movie. But the comic book, like you said, is a little bit more explicit because there is when we get introduced to Selena, I think she was having sex with a guy, and I think she's taking like a smoking break or something, or just a breather, and we can see or we can read that the guy is still touching himself, you know, and
Yeah.
those are just little details that makes it a little bit more sordid, a little bit more um, mature. That we know what that guy is doing, and he's trying to, convince Selena to come back to bed to finish him. And Selena is she's done with that life, and that's why she decides later on maybe to move on to something maybe not better, but something that will actually not denigrate her as much, I feel, because she inside maybe she feels like she deserves a little bit more, but maybe she's not. I feel like sometimes Selena doesn't know her value, and that's why she does that kind of thing, but she knows that she wants something better, and that's what pushes her to become Catwoman, because she doesn't because later on the comic book, when they say that Catwoman is just Batman's sidekick, she gets upset because she wants to make a name by herself. She wants to be something else. She just doesn't want to be relegated to the second page.
Yeah. Um, she is her own woman. She is, uh, yeah, she has her own abilities. She, as she says, she can take care of herself, um, and she can do other things. And obviously, she's not related to Batman in any way that she knows of, right?
Mm-hmm.
'Cause, but just commenting on the Selina Kyle in the Batman, I just find it pretty cool that she looks a lot more um well, she looks a lot like the Selina Kyle in Batman Year One, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, just Zoe Kravitz's look and characterization is a lot like the Batman Year One Selina Kyle.
Yeah, because she's even mixed, right, in the movie. I mean, she's a mix, and in the comics, you can see that she's mixed. But I'm not. I guess it was just to get more attention for Selena Kyle. But in the animated series, she's not mixed, right? She's white. Um, in the game, she's white, and I'm pretty sure that in modern comics of Batman, she's also white. So that's an interesting thing. Or I'm not sure if she's actually white or mixed in the newest comics, but when I remember Selena Kyle, the first time I saw her, I remember that she was white, and it was something interesting, that in year one she's mixed, and then they made her white, and then she became mixed again here in this Matt Reeves movie. That's just something interesting to me.
Okay, so going back a little bit uh, to Batman, I wanted to talk about the show from the 60s and how uh, this turn is completely different from from the the issue. We were talking about how Tim Burton is kind of cartoonish and silly and stuff like and just quite not as mature as the Batman that we know nowadays. I think, and I was gonna say that I think it's because um, Batman, the show in the 60s, was like that, and it stayed in the zeitgeist for a long time. This image of Batman in being silly, being over the top, right? Tim Burton is definitely over the top in a different way that the Batman show from the 60s was, but um, but it kind of has that same energy of being of silliness, of just sometimes ridiculousness going on in the show. But again, Miller and Mazzucchelli managed to ground the Batman, and I think it took the animated series again to change that view of Batman as so silly, and not that it isn't still, because definitely the characters, especially the villains, are over the top in Batman. The Joker, the Riddler, Scarecrow, they're not tame by any standard. They're completely over the top.
Yeah. Um, they are, but the cool thing about Matt Reeves, in my opinion, is that he was able to adapt the Riddler to a more grounded guy, you know? Because obviously, if you watch Tim Burton's Riddler, or if you see the Riddlers in the games, yeah, he's another tough guy. And in Matt Reeves' movie, he's still another the tough guy because he has some mental issues, but he acts more like a serial killer that you could actually see in the real world, you know? And and that's something that I appreciate about um, Matt Reeves' ability to adapt those characters to our era, you know, because I think he even uses TikTok or something, or he's streaming. He's on a streaming, right? He
Yeah.
streams to his sidekicks, and that's
Yeah.
how he gets sidekicks.
Mm-hmm.
That's something cool because you, I mean, if you have someone that has a, you know, like an extremist idea nowadays, you're always going to find people that agrees with those ideas, and the way that they connect nowadays is by the internet. And so using those modern elements to the Batman lore is something that refreshes the idea of what's the Batman and what's a villain nowadays. You know, it's not just a person who's crazy, who has a lot of money and pays the criminals to do the dirty job. It's just someone who has an ideal and finds people who have similar values or ideas, and then they get organized to cause anarchy, because that's what they want at the end, right? They want anarchy. The Riddler's minions. That's what they do at the end of the movie.
Yeah, I think that's that's the success in the Batman, in the Riddler character, because usually we took the Riddler as just a joke, right?
Mhm.
If you look at Jim Carrey's portrayal, it's just silly and stupid, and even though he has a reason to be upset at and what's the word, act up against the world, in Matt Reeves' the Batman, he grounds the Riddler two ways, like you said, by putting it in using the internet as we use it today, right? Today you can find one of the problems is these radical actors recruiting people from anywhere through social media, right? And that's what he does. So he grounds him that way. And then the other thing that he does is to ground him in our, if not the reality, at least a perception of what a serial killer is, as you said as well, right? The Riddler has a reason to be not corrupted but broken, right? He uh, is an orphan with a real grudge against society. What he went through is not something to be just cast aside. It's an important thing to consider, but um, his reaction is not the healthiest of reactions. So um, this grounding is brought on by this shift from Frank Miller's year one on, and it's not only in the Batman comic books. It's also it's spread to the rest of DC and other comic books.
One of the things that I was thinking about the Riddler, about what you said, is that he in the Matt Reeves movie, he's trying to search for acknowledgement. He wants to be acknowledged because he's this random person from society that was rejected, and now he's trying to search for this validation. And obviously, he's a very selfish person because he will go to the extreme to get his point across. And when he meets with Batman and Batman rejects him, his world falls apart, right? Because he was like, "Yeah, you and I, we are the same," blah blah blah. And Batman's like, "No, you're crazy." And I mean, the Riddler has a point. They're both psychopaths in their own way. Um, but that's a cool thing, you know, that the internet nowadays, it's a cool thing and it's not a cool thing because the internet can give you power and can give you a voice nowadays. You know, everyone can share their own opinion. Um, and there's a lot of crazy people like the Riddler nowadays, you know, that they want to get their point across. Uh, it doesn't matter the cost, but um, it's just I'm excited to see how Matt Reeves takes this um, tool and adapts it to other villains, you know, because if you think about it, he has more, you know, more to take, you know, but he has a tool that can be used for a lot of other things. For example, I don't know if you knew about this guy who was a serial killer, and he would review the tools that he would use to torture his victims in Amazon. He would purchase things in Amazon and then he would review them and he would say, "This is very good for this specific purpose." And that guy would actually kill people, you know? So it's one of the crazy things that you can find now on the internet. And it would be cool to see something like that on a sequel, you know?
Wow, I didn't know about that. That actually, that's very scary. Um, and I don't know, it just gives me chills. Think about that someone was reviewing tools based on his experience, using those tools to kill and torture, and I assume, right?
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
So if Batman would be a real thing and his villains would be a real thing, I think our era would be the perfect setup for that kind of stuff, you know, because there's so many people, and I don't want to say crazy. Maybe that's insensitive, but maybe that's the right word to use. But there's so many people with a lot of issues, um, just like the Riddler, and the internet gives them something that not even the Joker had in the 80s, you know? The Joker spread his influence through his mindset, through what his ideal of maybe a society should be. Or maybe he wasn't even trying to spread his ideology, but you know, it was just popular and then people would just follow him. Um, just like in the Joker movie. But nowadays, if the Joker would have access to the internet, and I haven't read the most recent comic books of Batman, I don't know if the Joker uses Facebook or something else to spread his influence, but he would have access to those tools. There would be, you know, his the people that follows him would be um bigger, you know. Just his minions, they would grow more and more every day because of the issues, because of the tools that we have on the internet to spread our ideas, you know, very easily.
Yeah. Um, it's scary to think how a universe that has what we have, um, a universe like Batman's would do with the tools that we have now that they didn't have back in the 80s, right? Which also uh, takes me back to another thing I wanted to point out, since you mentioned the 80s, and we're talking about these themes of corruption, of uh, infidelity, of sex, of just this seedy part of society, or the seedy part of human nature. Um, it's the 80s. The 80s. That's kind of what they thought about. They thought about having all the most money, having the as much sex as you could, and it was a time of corruption in society. There was a lot of issues that modern society still has, is actually reeling back from what the 80s, what happened in the 80s. And I think Frank Miller reflects that also in Year One. It's a product of its time. But the difference is that whereas other media, especially movies, reveled in uh, in that gaudiness, um, Frank Miller points to the fact that it's not a good thing. And I'm not saying that he's a moralist by any means, but he's saying that it's a problem.
Yeah,
But just look at Falcone, right?
yeah, he's in the high society. He's untouchable. He even has dinner with Commissioner Loeb. Um, it's crazy that there's this almost friendship between them, or maybe not friendship, maybe it's a relationship of interest. They both have their agendas, they both want power, they want money, and it doesn't matter if Falcone is a mob lord. Commissioner Lowe still has a relationship with him because he knows that he can help him to fulfill his means. And that's something scary that happens today as well. Um, yeah, it's in Flash, for example. He's a key part of the story because he holds a lot of information about Commissioner Loeb, and that's why when Flash and Jim are having issues as partners, Loeb says, "Yeah, I expected more from him, but you have to teach him a lesson because he knows that he is a threat to his way of living, his style of living, and he knows he has to take him down, but he needs to do it in a smart way. And since Flash is not able to do it, that's when he hires um, Falcone to do it."
Yeah. Just going back a little bit on your comment on the high society, right? It's just um I don't know if it's frustrating or just being cynical. It was the best way to react to how, as you said, Falcone um and Loeb are walking the same circles in high society. For high society, it doesn't matter what Falcone does, is because he has the power, and Loeb is under him, right? Um, and the rule is that the high society of Gotham really doesn't care about what happens as long as they are still at the top, which is also kind of what happens nowadays.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking about, for example, when Commissioner Loeb is having dinner with all those fancy, um, with all that fancy people and with Falcone, and they start talking about Batman, how Batman is not a threat for them, how Batman makes people feel more secure, and they still feel untouchable. But it's cool that Batman lets them see that they're actually not untouchable anymore. Um, and that also happens in um, The Dark Knight when Batman goes to capture the Chinese guy when he goes to China, and then Batman says that he doesn't have a jurisdiction. He can go wherever he wants and capture whoever he wants. That's another cool thing, right? And it's that Batman has that power to intimidate those in power because he doesn't play by the rules, and that's something that fits because the people in these comic books and maybe in our society sometimes, or not sometimes, most of the times they don't play by the rules. But the cool thing is that the comics books have Batman, but maybe we don't have anything like that nowadays.
Yeah. I don't know. It just right now it's just you mentioning the Dark Knight Returns. So just sorry, the Dark Knight, not the Dark Knight Returns, but the Dark Knight. Um, just made me think of the aesthetic. I was always thinking of the shot um in the blue sky, the was it dawn? Yeah, it's a dawn. It's a dawn shot, and how that changed uh, from the dark uh, aesthetic, the high contrast lighting from Tim Burton and even the animated series, right? So dark to the Christopher Nolan movies that they are shot more like they look more real. They don't look so stylized as Tim Burton or the animated series. Um, and I was thinking how that grounds um, how the other aesthetic grounded people or grounded the story more in possibly in psychological reality, more in a psychological reality, but this changed to a more realistic look in Christopher Nolan's Batman actually makes it grounds it more in reality, but in a physical reality, right? And it's just an evolution. And I don't know that the Batman um it thinking about it, it seems to me like it's a hybrid of both the stylized dark uh
Mhm.
idea of Batman, a dark um aesthetic of Batman, and something that doesn't want to stay away too far from the physical reality that Chris Nolan established. Um, especially looking at the scenes, not at the scenes from, let's say, the car chase with Penguin or the rescue in no, not the rescue, when he's fighting uh the minions with machine guns, where you see that's a pretty cool sequence, but where you see the action chopped up through the light of the bullets coming out, right?
Yeah.
That was pretty cool, but it's very stylized. It's not grounded in reality, and it's just a difference of styles here from Christopher Nolan to Matt Reeves, but it shows how the story can be told in different ways and be pretty effective in those different ways.
I never thought about it that way. I never thought that. I always, when we think about the Matt Reeves movie, we think that Batman feels realistic, but I didn't think in what sense he felt realistic. And like you said, he feels realistic in a psychological way, because yeah, he's a little bit more stylish. The shots, ambience, everything feels. Even Bruce Wayne's manner, it's all gothic, all this pointy windows, super tall. It feels very gothic, very appropriate for Bruce Wayne's character. The place that he dinners, this table that he has, it looks very fancy. A lot of meticulous details. Even the way that he dresses, with his dark glasses and his emo looking hair. You know, it kind of feels more stylish. Maybe in reality, it would look a little silly. But yeah, I mean, his ideas are more grounded in the sense of the psychological way, like you said. And yeah, it's something that I didn't think about it. But yeah, it feels like a fusion of Year One and Christopher Nolan's movie. It just feels like it just feels natural. It feels like the natural next step for Batman in um, the big screen. So that's something cool.
Yeah, now that you mention the aesthetic of the mansion, right? In this case, a tower in the Batman. I think I compare it to Christopher Nolan's uh, both the building and the mansion where we saw Batman's house or Bruce Wayne's house. Um, they don't feel consistent to Batman, right? Matt Reeves's mansion or the tower, they do feel like it's a like it's Batman's house or Bruce Wayne's house. And even when uh, Christopher Nolan's movies are more are grounded more in reality and physical reality, it's more consistent to the character what Matt Reeves has done um, with that setting, with the setting of the mansion or the tower.
Yeah, I guess it's because Christopher Nolan is trying to explore the duality of Batman and Bruce Wayne, and that's why we see more contrast in the Wayne Manor. It looks a little bit more fancy. A little, it looks like it's a little bit more British. I don't know what word to use. It looks like a castle, um, or like a mansion, a manor. um, and yeah, there's this contrast between Bruce and Batman that I like in the Christopher Nolan's movies. And yeah, Matt Reeves, he fused Bruce and Batman in a single character. And maybe in the future, we'll see more of the duality of Batman and Bruce Wayne. But maybe that's just the vision that he has about Batman.
Yeah, um, it's it's uh, curious how we're talking about. We started talking about Batman Year One, right? And now we're talking about the Batman and the Christopher Nolan. Well, Matt Reeves' Batman and the Christopher Nolan movies, and I think that speaks to how important Batman Year One is to how we see Batman today, to our perception of Batman, to what we see Bruce Wayne and Batman are as people, as characters, as um, heroes, superheroes, anti-heroes, all of those at the same time. Where the the Batman from the 60s and in the TV show and the 50s and in the in the Silver Age of comic books just is not there anymore, fortunately. Um, that it has lost. I'm gonna say it's innocence, but it's not really innocence. It's this aloofness to what people want to read and to what people want to experience in in their stories. And I'm not saying that everybody wants a tragedy. I'm just saying that people want more complex things. At least that's in my case. That's what I want. I don't want black and white, black and white Manichaean portrayals of people, because people are not that way. At least not in the vast majority. They're never just black or white. There's always shades of gray. And I also think that Batman, that change in Batman has helped uh, in society change our views. Um, Maybe not so much nowadays, because we are pretty polarized in any place that you go to. But um, that has to do with other things like echo chambers and on the internet. Uh, but at least through Batman, we got to experience a little bit more nuance, a little bit more questioning of why things are the way they are, and why people act the way they act. And I'm not saying that it's Batman's. Uh, it's all Batman's credit to Batman's credit. I think it's probably just a manifestation of how we want to see things, to experience things as a society, that things are not black and white.
Yeah. And I guess that's why the comic book doesn't really have a very happy ending, because in real life there's never a true happy ending. There's always going to be a struggle about something. Maybe you're going to get out of one struggle to go into a next one. And that's how life works in reality. And maybe that's something that people don't want to see. That's why, well, that's why Disney movies, for example, they're very popular, because you always have that good ending, that happy ending. And because you want to cheat your mind, you want to live in this reality, and everyone needs that once in a while. You need this escape from reality, um, that at the end everything is going to be okay, and it will, but maybe not in the way that you think it will be okay. And Batman, at least in year one, um, we we see Gordon trying to, put Flash behind the bars. He's trying to put Commissioner Loeb behind the bars. Um, they're trying to take down Falcone, um, but they can't. They can't, because there's too much corruption. At the end, Flash, he ended up being smarter than anyone, because he, like the comic says, he was writing down everything that he talked to Commissioner Loeb, and at the end he gets a deal, and he's not in jail anymore. Same with Commissioner Loeb. He People come to learn that he's corrupted, but this corrupted judge is in charge of his case, and now Commissioner Loeb is free. you know so the guys who were bad, and we as public wanted them to deserve what they deserve, at the end they don't get it, just because life doesn't work like that. Life is not going to give you what you want almost ever, and you need to learn how to deal with that situation. And I guess in that sense it has a good ending, because Gordon learns that his life will continue even after he cheats Barbara with Detective Essen. She talks about how they're going to therapy, and he talks how Barbara is not happy about it, but they're making progress, so that's good for them. And he talks about how, after all that effort, Flash and Commissioner Loeb are still, you know, not behind bars, but he sees the bright future, because now he has a partner. Now Batman will help him. And even though we get a little hint of the Joker poisoning Gotham's reservoir of water or something like that, he
Yeah.
still sees a light at the end of the tunnel because now he has a friend that he can count on.
Yeah. Speaking of Essen a little bit, just another complicated character. Um, she does this knowing that he's married, but at the same time, she is the one who comes up with the idea with that Batman is Bruce Wayne, showing that she's not just a pretty face, that she's pretty smart, right? And in the end, um, Gordon has a compelling reason not to keep investigating uh, the obvious person who could be Batman, right? Since he helped him get his kid or save his kid, or by saving his kid. Um, but in thinking about what this year one means, it's it's just amazing how much it has shaped this perception of Batman. And I know I've said this point, but it just I think it's also a reflection of of those changes in society, and it, I don't know, it excites me to see that a lot of the times comic books are ahead of the curve, you know. um X-Men, uh maybe not so much ahead of the curve, but they certainly helped shape the views during the 70s about race, um after the civil rights movement. And comic books also, when they are well written, they can also help us see things in society that maybe need some change, like Frank Miller did. And I don't know that that was his objective. That's not irrelevant, but it's not so important that his objective was or wasn't that. I would say that it's more a natural consequence of what he writes and how he writes and what he writes about. Um, yes, he does dwell and he in violence, and in, it's just, I don't know. He makes dark themes attractive, but that's okay.
Yeah, we love dark themes. I Nowadays there's this um, demand for dark stories, horror things. Um, it's just people like that kind of stuff. I don't know why, but we like that kind of stuff, and that's why this story is very appealing to me, and I'm pretty sure to everyone who has read it before. So I want to um, just end our conversation on a little note. We didn't talk a lot about other characters that are important in the Batman lore, um, like I forgot Two Face's identity. What's
Oh,
his
Harvey
name?
Dent. Harvey
Yeah,
Dent.
I don't know why I forgot his name. We didn't talk about Harvey Dent, and he's very important. Maybe not as much in this comic book, but he exemplifies that idea of the White Knight never, or that doesn't get the good ending, you know? And that's something that we're gonna talk later when we talk about the Long Halloween, because that comic is about Batman, but about Harvey Dent and how, like here in year one, the good guys sometimes they don't get a good ending.
Yep.
Um,
And And that's the way the cookie crumbles.
Yep. Okay. Well, I think it was pretty cool to talk about these topics. Definitely, we talk about things that are not related to comic books, but it's the cool thing about just analyzing and having a good time with your friends about these kind of things. So I think if you don't have anything else to say, um, we can just end this first episode of the Silver Screen Syndicate, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you for tuning in. That's all.
See ya.
Bye.